Hey everyone, Jose Elizondo here. I'm just so excited to have been on Back to Basics show. Thank you so much for inviting me. I want to invite you guys to definitely subscribe and keep listening. It's been such an amazing show. A lot of my success I can contribute to taking it back to the basics, to the simple things that I do in my business and all the little details that I take care of. So definitely want to encourage you guys to subscribe and keep listening and seeing on all the different topics, different ways that you guys can take things back to basics to get your success. Hope you guys are having an awesome day.
Hey folks, my name is Girish Bali, the host for Back to Basics. Hope you're enjoying all the episodes that I've done so far, and I'm so excited for today's episode. So just an FYI, before we start the episode and bring the guest in and start the show, I want to inform everyone that whoever wants to ask any questions when it comes to virtual reality and neuroscience and all that fun stuff, you can go to Clubhouse. We are live also on Clubhouse. We're also live on LinkedIn. We're also live on YouTube and all the other platforms that you can think of. We are there. Back to Basics is everywhere today. I am super excited. And if anyone wants to ask any questions, even on LinkedIn or YouTube, and just ask a question if you don't want to be online on Clubhouse. Right now, I have turned on the hand raising on Clubhouse. And soon as we are ready to ask any questions, we will turn it on. So right after the episode that we're going to have today. So let's start. Let's start now. Okay, guys, thank you again for everyone for coming here. This is Back to Basics, and we are so excited to have an amazing show. Today we are live on all the platforms, and thank you everyone for coming here and supporting us on this platform. Today we're going to be talking about neuroscience or NeuroReality or AR and VR or anything to do with VR, virtual reality. Those are the words that we'll be using today. And it's a crazy world out there. The reality 2.0, as everyone says. Now, the thing is, now the question comes is, when did this all start? Well, we'll find out. What are we doing now? We will ask that question. What's going to happen later? We're going to ask that question too. So there's a lot of questions that we have, and we don't know what it is. And today I have this guest of mine, and I've talked to her for weeks and months before, and she was a little sick before when we first met. But today, she is back and running and kicking. So today, let's invite our guest today, and let's talk to her. Faviola, how are you? And thanks for coming on Back to Basics.
It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm really excited to go through our conversation about all things XR and virtual reality and neuroscience and try and keep it back to basics. So keeping with the idea of back to basics, let's try and make sure that everyone can access this information that might be a little bit difficult for some people that aren't in our field.
Yeah. Thank you again for coming on the show, and very, very honored for you to come here. But before we start, and I'll ask all the reality questions and all the VR questions and everything else, I'm going to ask this question, and I ask this question to every guest of mine. What does back to basic mean to you?
And so I just got a little bit into it, but what I really think back to basics means to me is taking everyone to a place where they can relate to the topics that you're discussing, because everyone comes from a different viewpoint. We all have different cultural viewpoints, personal viewpoints, religious, emotional, we're unique individuals. So you have to take concepts that are complicated, such as neuroscience, and simplify them to the extent that if you're talking to a neuroscientist or if you're talking to your neighbor, they can still understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you again for answering that question, and thank you again for coming on the show. So before we get into the reality questions and the VR questions, what does neuro mean? Obviously, we know that it's something to do with nerves, but I'm pretty sure there's something beyond that, right? So can you explain that if you don't mind?
Neuro is, I guess, it's the Latin prefix for anything to do with nerves, with neurons. We as humans, we have 86 billion neurons in our brain, which is absolutely astonishing. And they communicate with each other via electrical signals that are then transmitted into chemical signals, which we call neurotransmitters. You might have heard the name dopamine or serotonin. And they basically talk with one another, and they function in a way that allows us as human beings to complete everything that we do, from our motor movements to our cognitive functioning to the conversation that you and I are having right now. So neuro is this all-encompassing term that you would hear before anything that is talking about the brain.
Yeah, thank you again for answering that question. So I want people to understand that neuroscience is a very complex thing, and I think, and so I guess maybe the technology side is kind of going to help with that, right? So how does this? Well, we all know what AR and VR is. I mean, there are other episodes that I have done about AR and VR. And if anyone is listening right now, if you don't know what it is, please go to the other one, because that's the prerequisite in order to understand today's episode. So AR and VR, how does that handshake with the neuroscience?
So if you're talking about mixing different types of realities together, which is essentially what we're doing, we're creating real world and a virtual world, and we're combining this with human interactions that are happening in a computer world. So the way that it happens to blend and mix with multiple areas of medicine or healthcare is the fact that we're capable of creating these environments to be specific to any need that we really want. So, you hear the metaverse all the time, right? This is a big catchy word. And the metaverse is basically just the idea that we're going to have a network of these 3D worlds, and we're all going to be communicating together in them. So right now, what we're accomplishing in particular in the medical field with VR and XR in general, AR as well. XR is just for people that don't know, just the overarching term for extended reality. What we're able to achieve is sensitive data capture. We're capable of having immersion. We're capable of gamification of difficult tasks, of making things safe. For example, if you had a patient that was having difficulty crossing the road because of a visual deficit or brain damage, you can make that safe by allowing this patient to engage in a virtual world instead of sending them out and allowing them to go out into traffic and potentially put themselves into danger. So the possibilities are really, really endless. There are many, many different applications, from surgery to PTSD training. But what we really focus on at NeuroReality is acquired brain injuries.
Yeah, thank you again for explaining that. Thank you again for that. When people they think of AR and VR, the first thing comes in their mind is, what game am I going to play? So how do we explain to people that it's beyond a game, beyond anything else? It's not about having fun and entertainment and watching Netflix on there or anything on there. So can you explain that to people, that there's beyond that also?
It is beyond that, and also includes that. So it's beyond that in the sense of, think about meeting rooms, how COVID has completely transformed the world into hybrid work. And VR meeting rooms and sessions have become a huge thing. But really, if you want to talk about, okay, we look for fun in games, of course we do. No, who doesn't love fun in games, right? So what VR can do is take these types of difficult tasks and make them fun. So gamification and what we call serious games aren't necessarily games that are made for you to look at like a AAA game, and think of something that is going to be this amazing shooter game that you're going to have, an incredible experience with, or any typical AAA games. That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is creating games that actually have a purpose behind them. So whether that's education or improving healthcare outcomes, that's how you should think about the applications of VR that we're talking about today. But there are so many other applications that extend far beyond the possibilities of gaming.
Yeah, thank you again for explaining that. So if I wanted to buy a VR set, those are expensive, aren't they? So is there a particular one that I should be looking at when it comes to the VR sets?
It depends on your price point. So I think that in the beginning, everyone's notion, just like in the beginning of cell phones, when they first were coming into inception, we had these big brick phones, and you're lucky if you had one of those, and then the Nokia flip phones. These were expensive pieces of technology, and look at how far they've evolved in just a few years, right?
Right.
So with virtual reality, it's sort of been the same. If you look at the inception of, I'd say around 2016, 2017 was when the hype rehyped, right? Like we've had virtual reality for a long time. But when you're looking at accessibility, right now we've got the Quest is a huge player. So Oculus Quest, especially the Oculus Quest 2, that's a decent price point. So you're looking at somewhere, depending upon the memory, of let's say around $300 to $400. That's reasonable. It's a standalone set. Doesn't require you to have anything like a computer that's very high end and can run this type of technology. But there's then, of course, the issue that people may have concerns with their data privacy because it's owned by Meta. So then you head over to devices like Pico Neo, a little bit more expensive. The Pico Neo 3 is my preferred VR headset, and the preferred VR headset, especially of a lot of healthcare providers. So this is, I'd say, about more around the €700 range. And then you have HTC Vive coming out with multiple headsets, from the Pro to the Cosmos to the Flow, which is actually very specific towards medical use. And you're going to see more. The Valve, I think, is one of the most expensive, but you're just going to see more and more of these companies coming out and showing traction. And we're going to see who wins, right? You've got Apple entering the market. I mean, with that happening, with Facebook and Meta entering the market, and Apple, I think that it's very clear that VR is here to stay, and more than likely it will become less cumbersome, right? Right now it's not as accessible, as you said. It's more costly and it's clunky. Like, let's be real,
Yes, I mean, there is price difference. There's going to be feature difference too. Am I right? Okay, so which means that, does that mean that if I have Oculus and then you don't, right? Does that mean that you and I are not going to be on the same page when it comes to features, or what? What does that mean?
So what I would recommend people do, because that's not my area of expertise, I would refer to my developers for that. But I do know enough to say, make sure that you look at the specs of those are easily available. You can go and Google the different VR sets that you're interested in and look at the specs. Look at the types of games that you're trying to run. Do they need to be rendered at, a certain amount per second? So it's just more a matter of also how much field of view you would like to have, how lightweight you would like them to be. There's so many different options with VR sets. And then, as you said, functionality. Oculus, of course, has the Oculus Store. So certain games are available there that you won't be able to find on other platforms. It's certainly something that people will take into account when they're buying a VR set, is what are they going to use it for?
Yeah, that is so true. Thank you again for that. Obviously, hence, the headset is one thing. The other is the app, right? And then what's after that? That's where the neuroscience part comes in, or how does that come in?
Yeah, absolutely. So the design of the development of the app, of course, you have a back end that captures all sorts of sensitive data and is also part of it. But the way that we have developed Oculus Quest, which is NeuroReality's solution to basically retraining your brain utilizing virtual reality and creating virtual telehealth clinics that enable people to not only participate in neurorehabilitation after a brain injury in clinics, but also participate when they go home. They can take this intervention with them, and that creates continuity of care, leading to better overall healthcare practices. So that's really what we're doing here. And how it all leads together. Well, there are major neurobiological principles that are stemming behind the design of the game. And when you think of the brain having neuroplasticity, generally, and neuroplasticity, it just refers to the ability of the brain to functionally wire together and also to basically reorganize your neural networks and even actually grow new neurons. So this happens in learning, this happens in many different ways. And about 10 to 20 years ago, we didn't even realize that our brains were plastic beyond a certain point of development. We thought that this was only happening in children in the developmental phase. But what we learned is that this can occur far beyond development, all the way through adult years, and also in response to traumatic events. So what we utilize is a combination of different aspects. We have a patented device that's CE marked. So it's a medical device, class 1 medical device. And we look at things like repetition, goal-oriented repetition that is highlighting and activating specific neural areas. So our brain is quite functionally specific, right? There's a part of your brain called the hippocampus that's to do with memory. That doesn't just solely mean that it's to do with memory. At the end of the hippocampus is your amygdala. That's to do with emotional regulation. Now, those are just structures, but that doesn't mean that there's not networks that are flowing through. In our frontal lobe, we process a lot of very important information. And say you had, depending upon where you had a brain injury, we want to reactivate those areas, or at least if there's like a roadblock, think of a roadblock, brain injury, roadblock, those cells are not capable of working anymore. We want to create networks that are capable of functioning in the same way or compensating for this loss of function that you have, whether it be physical or what we concentrate on as cognitive problems. So problems with your memory, attention, etc. So you do things like that, repetition that's goal-oriented, and we do this in a gamified manner to make it less difficult and less cumbersome for our patients. We also utilize a reward system because dopamine is something that people seek. We are reward-seeking creatures. We thrive off of this. And dopamine is that neurotransmitter that gives you that boost, that feeling of reward. So if you include these types of elements, you're far more likely to have players or patients engage with the neurorehabilitation program, thereby leading to further neuroplasticity because they're actually motivated to do what they're doing and they're adhering to their programs. Then the third point is something that's kind of controversial, and other neuroscientists that might be listening will understand why it's controversial. We have something called a mirror neuron system. And that's our monkey see, monkey do system. In neuroscience in humans, we call this observational learning. But what we have basically established, this occurs, the mirror neuron system, in mice and rats, and we know exactly where it is and which neurons are firing. But in human beings, what we've established is that the same neural networks are being activated when you watch a task happening as opposed to when you're performing the task yourself. So for individuals, for example, that have such severe physical debilitation after experiencing a brain injury, we utilize techniques that come from these neuroscientific principles of observational learning, allowing these individuals to perhaps regain some type of neuroplasticity based upon simply watching the actions being carried out in front of them. So that's a lot. That was quite a mouthful for you.
Full. It'll definitely a mouthful, but we have to understand that these detailed stuff, it is so needed, and so we all need to understand that there's other science behind it or algorithm behind it of this whole thing. So I totally understand that. Actually, I'm really grasping the whole the information that you're giving me. So it's great. Thank you again for that. You
Of
know,
course.
So does that mean that it's like a 3D scan of what's happening, and then it's easier to get in and what needs to be operated versus, let's say, a proper ultrasound when we go to the hospitals? I mean, this is a really a 4D vision, isn't it? So what are your thoughts on that?
So basically, we're not doing anything like an MRI scan where you're giving someone a picture of their brain. That is something that I find actually frustrating.
Okay.
And we have included now elements, which I'll get into in a moment, that allow you to see this type of growth. These are gamification elements.
Hmm.
So what happens that we're able to do, your patient journey is generally you're admitted to the hospital for something like this. You undergo a number of tests, standardized tests, neurological tests, and then we apply training, right? So when we do that, then we're capable of basically understanding through the MRI scans and understanding through these standardized tests how these patients are functioning, what parts of their brain were damaged, and how we should potentially proceed in rehabilitation.
Hmm.
But what we can do with virtual reality and with neuroreality is we can tailor make these things because people are heterogeneous, meaning they're all different. And especially people with brain injuries, they come in,
Right.
present completely different. Someone could have had a stroke, they could have had a car accident, they could have neuro-oncological problems. So there's so many different ways people will present that all be unique. And we need to make sure that we're treating people in their own unique way. So we're making sure that while we take into account all these fun things, we're collecting very sensitive data. We
Hmm.
can collect about 13,000 data points per minute.
Hmm.
And all of that data will lead eventually to what we're developing, which is an AI diagnostic tool,
Hmm.
which I don't think will eliminate. I think we will still be utilizing MRIs, DTIs, fMRI scans, EEG, all sorts of neuroimaging techniques.
Hmm.
But it will also be able to provide more sensitive data to create more directed care. When you go in, you get this snapshot, right, of your brain. If
Hmm.
you're looking at that, that's useful in certain ways.
Hmm.
But unless you put someone in a functional MRI, you
Hmm.
don't know what's occurring with their brain when they're doing a particular activity. You just can see where the damage is.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what we included in the game, this is sort of like my brainchild,
Hmm.
was the Tree of Life. And that sort of acts as a way that when you play through the game and you learn these different functions like retraining calculation or attention, the tree itself becomes more bright and becomes more full. And
Hmm.
I wanted that to be a metaphor for people to actually see what was happening in their brain, that it's healing. Because when you go to do physical rehabilitation, you get to see what's happening.
Hmm.
But we're not going to go and run people through MRIs, which cost insurance companies upwards of ten to hundreds of thousands of
Of course.
euros. So we can't do that. And I
Right.
think that technology is then going to play this huge role in making these types of things a lot less necessary, and then making it so that we can run them when we need to, and we can also gain very valuable data from other technologies when we need to.
Yeah. Thank you again. And there will be some other questions too. But before we do that, uh, do you want to go and tell who you are and what your company is all about? And because you have tons of knowledge, believe me, and I've done my homework to bring you on my show.
I'm like, how much do you want me to get into about who I am? Just
I
the
know
neuroscience
we talked
background, or?
hours before, so yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, so I have like a very, very odd background. I actually modeled internationally for about 15 years. And when I was doing that, I was lucky enough to gather enough money to pay for my studies. And I did my master's degree in cognitive neuropsychology and neuroscience at Oxford. I wasn't really particularly interested in modeling, but moreover, what I was learning when I was at all of these different shoots, traveling around the world, living out of my suitcase, was that brands are different and cultures are different, and people need their brands presented to them in a way that fits within their own culture. So that was something that I was really taking along the way with me. I then was the head of a PR firm, PR and marketing firm in Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Tokyo, where I was responsible for doing just that, taking high-end products and transitioning them from the Western market to the Asian market. Following this, I had a brief stint in geopolitics and, just as you do. And then I returned to my studies. Meanwhile, actually, I should say, this is something I think that a lot of a lot of individuals are doing these days, which is doing remote learning. And I was able to do remote learning and come back and do my labs during the summer. So I was, meanwhile, still, I was majoring in biology. And in the end, I switched to a focus in neuroscience. And lo and behold, life events sort of hit you in a hard way, but they wake you up and make you do things that you love to do. I have a journal that I wrote when I was 8 years old that says I want to be a scientist. And that has never changed. So that was always the goal. Unfortunately, my father passed away after my little stint in geopolitics. And that's what spawned me personally, going through that growth and having that impactful experience to really go back to my passion, which was neuroscience. And what I do with NeuroReality is, it was very unconventional. I decided that I wanted to do a PhD. And I didn't want to do it in the way that many students would, which is go to a lab, find a professor, get the funding via a grant. I created a startup company because I saw that there was actually need for this. There was a product there. There wasn't just something that was a tool we could research. This was actually something that was needed. And I was able to secure funding to create NeuroReality, and I'm very lucky to have an incredibly passionate and talented team of researchers, people from business development, people from amazing developers and artists, and just kind of blending all these worlds together, where it's really cool because, you'll onboard a new developer and realize how much computer science knowledge they have, and then how that translates to them really understanding very difficult neuroscientific information quickly, because if you have a scientific background, you can kind of deduce it pretty quickly. But I love how all of our worlds kind of mesh together. And that's sort of me. I am a citizen of the world. I have 3 passports and Dutch citizenship, and I'm kind of a firecracker with a lot of passion for what I do.
Yeah. From 8th grade till your father passed away, so sorry about that. And then now you have just created a monster of empire, and then on top of that, you came on Back to Basics. On top of that, right? So, who are you going to be for the next 5 more years? It seems like you have done so much on the realm of technology, on the realms of AI, on the realms of XR, VR, and all the neuroscience. So what are you going to be for the next 5 more years, you think?
I think that's a great question for everybody to ask themselves. I mean, we're evolving every single day, and I'm constantly learning. So I'm one of those people that is like, the more you know, the less you know. Because the more you get into a topic, the more you're interested in it. And the further you delve into it, you realize actually there's so much more to be found. And I'd say that in the next 5 years, ideally, I'd like to see NeuroReality become one of the front runners in neurorehabilitation and be acquired by a larger company such as Philips or Stryker or GE Medical, any of these larger companies that are interested in taking it to this next level. Yeah. But for myself personally, I see myself continuing to be a serial entrepreneur in other endeavors once we complete one of our other series of funding. Then I have a lot of other ideas that I'm not going to let out right now because they're not patented. But I have a lot of other ideas that I think can bring technology and neuroscience together as well. I'll give you like a little bit of a hint. I'm very interested in wearables and in brain-computer interfaces, which are essentially, they sound super complicated, but they're essentially a way for humans to have their brain signals recorded, the electrical signals recorded, and then interact with the computer. So, for example, you'll have a little video that's being shown on a screen for individuals with ADHD, for example. This is quite common. And you'll be trained to utilize a certain pattern of functionality with your brain waves, and you'll either see the image, or if you drift away, then you won't. So that's a very simplistic example. I also have a huge interest in AI, and I think that's the way of the future. That's where I'm not going to get too far into discussion, but I believe that in the next 2 years, we will bring NeuroReality into a diagnostic tool, and that will be utilizing supervised machine learning algorithms. So like you said, there's like a game, but then behind it, there's so much that goes on that you're not realizing is actually happening.
Yeah. Thank you again. And whenever you get that patented, and when you want to go and talk about it further, please do contact us.
Absolutely.
Real complicated thing. We want to simplify that in my show, and I think that's what this Back to Basics is all about. So thank you again for coming on the show. And whoever is listening and whoever is watching live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and all the other platforms that I have, including Clubhouse, if you have any questions for an amazing guest of mine, this is the right time to do it. But it will be in a few minutes, and I will be also raising my hand raising on Clubhouse because I disabled it earlier today. So just give me a second, and I just enabled that, and I'm just going to bring one person in to help me manage, the Clubhouse platform. So just give me a second. Don't say anything yet. I just made you the moderator, so if you don't mind just helping me out to bring people up whenever that comes in. So thank you again for that. So one last question, if you don't mind. So you're saying AI and VR is going to make a big thing. So which means that we need to do our homeworks to understand AI and machine learning and neuroscience. Is that how it works now, you think?
Shall I give you a really simplistic example of how I explain AI and these different classification algorithms to people?
Please, if you don't mind, yes.
Let's do it. So everybody knows what a spam filter is. We all have emails and we all have spam filters. Probably everyone that's listening to this show has had opportunities to experience a very important email sometimes landing in their spam filter. So these algorithms aren't perfect, but what happens is a spam filter is essentially something that utilizes supervised machine learning. And this is a type of AI. It is given a huge data set. So like what we do with NeuroReality, we collect this huge amount of data. This is something that's capable with virtual reality technology. And your spam filter has this huge amount of data that it was fed, and it was trained with this data. And it learned to categorize certain features, variables, features, and say, this is an element that looks like spam. So I'm going to classify this one as spam, and this one goes in the inbox, right? And after time, this algorithm, because it's learning as it goes along, it starts to learn, oh, okay, there was an important one that you missed that ended up in your spam filter. You click it and you make sure that it goes into your inbox. The spam filter learns that that's not spam. That's something that's relevant for you to go in your inbox. It's just basic classification algorithms. And you can do the same thing by looking at tons and tons of data from healthy populations of all different ages and genders and education levels, socioeconomic backgrounds, all these things. And you can basically create profiles that would be standardized about what you could expect a patient or in this case, a person's range to fall within, and that's healthy performance, right? So then once the algorithms are trained to understand what healthy performance is, they can distinguish between unhealthy performance. And that's sort of how the AI and the neuroscience and the VR all kind of come together. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Thank you so much for explaining that. And, I'm very grateful for you explaining that in details, because we'll just have to go to different places to get that information and to get you on the show to explain that in detail. Thank you again for explaining that. So,
my pleasure.
But before you leave today, and before anyone asks you any questions, the last thing I'm going to go and say is, do you have any last words for all the listeners and viewers on my show? And how was your journey on Back to Basics on top of that?
I love the Back to Basics concept, because I think that in our field, scientists often or individuals in technology often keep this information sort of within our own sphere. And dissemination of knowledge in a way that is digestible by everyone is so important. Because if we can learn from each other, then you can have so much synergy between different industries and creatives working together in ways that you would have never thought. Amazing artists working on technology, and doctors working with other surgeons remotely using AR in order to guide these procedures that are extremely complicated. Robots that are capable of removing blood clots. There are so many different things that we're capable of doing that we don't talk about in a basic way. And we want to have coffee table conversations, right? We want to be able to talk to our friends and say, hey, I learned about this, and I want to tell you what I learned in a way that you're going to also understand and that people are going to remember, instead of being like, yeah, that was really interesting, but that was way too complex for me. So that's great. But I think that keeping things simple, and that is sort of like a true sign that you know what you're talking about. When you keep things really simple, then, well, at least in my experience, then I find that people actually are quite knowledgeable, because if they want to explain something to you in this convoluted, complex manner, they probably don't understand it that well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, that's what I stand for, and I've mentioned this numerous times in different platforms, that we are not we're not dumb people. We are intelligent.
No.
So we have to teach them in a way to make them understand about anything and everything, and that's what this Back to Basics is all about. So thank you again for being on that same mission as I stand for. So thank you again for being here.
Absolutely. And last, I guess, final words is that anyone that's interested in learning more about what we do at NeuroReality, either hit us up on our LinkedIn or check out our website, send an email. We're more than happy to answer any questions, and always excited for people to be engaged in what we're engaged in.
Yeah. Thank you again for coming on the show, making this brighter for me. So before you leave today, there will be some questions, but I just wanted to go and end this show, if you don't mind. So I'm just going to put you on mute before I bring you back on. So guys, thank you again for coming here on Back to Basics. We were talking about neuroscience and AR and VR and how it kind of works between the two realms. And by the way, AI and machine learning will be also later in the future too, as part of a tool that she just mentioned. And we might have a second part or a third part on Back to Basics, whenever that is, but that will be from her, I'm pretty sure. Now, as usual, as always, there is a quote from the day from Back to Basics, and hopefully my guest and everyone else will like it. The quote is, VR is a way to escape the real world into something more fantastic. It has the potential to be the most social technology of all times. Take advantage of it. I mean, that's what we're trying to do here. And advantage in a way to teach you guys and teach everyone, learn from your own body. And that's what we're trying to do. As usual, as always, what do we always say at the end of the episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care, God bless, and stay tuned. Now we're just going to bring our guest back, and we're just going to go and chit chat. We're going to go. Please be mindful. We have only 20 minutes left, 15 minutes left. I don't want to keep my guest waiting that long. But if there's any questions, please ask. I think there's a question. Let me see here. How is Corey app related to neuro feedback? What's your question?
How is what?
Koji. Okay, here, let me see.
How is Koji's Quest?
Yeah.
How's Koji's app related to neurofeedback?
Yeah.
We don't currently utilize anything like a BCI, as I was explaining before, brain-computer interface. So we don't really have any neurofeedback per se. That would require an EEG cap or something of that nature. But we have utilized neuroimaging techniques in order to understand what type of neural activity is elicited when you play the game. So neurofeedback is basically what I was explaining, a brain-computer interface where you're operating, a human gets to operate with the machine, and we're kind of going back and forth and playing together in this really exciting way. That's something that could definitely be integrated into Koji's Quest, but currently we're not doing anything with neurofeedback.
Yeah. Thank you again. And Chris, I hope that answers the question. If you still have more questions, please.
Yeah, if you still got any more questions, feel free to extend upon it.
Yeah. So thank you again. I think there's some few people on Clubhouse. I think they want to ask a question, if that's okay with you. I think LJ or Richard, I'm not really sure who wants to go first. Do let me know.
I'll jump in. How you doing? I didn't catch the beginning. What was your name again, miss?
Faviola.
Very, very nice. Very nice. And you mentioned Euros. Where are you originally at? Like, are you like over in the UK?
No, I am in Amsterdam, actually. We are an Amsterdam-based company, and we'll be releasing in the United States, hopefully in the next few months. So we're currently available in Europe, and we should be available in the US coming soon.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. It's very interesting that Girish and I we're talking about this before the show, that I wanted to kind of get involved with this type of technology for my podcast, because it gives me a chance to kind of experiment with the technology, and a reason to, saying, and I feel like I'm completely wasting time in my office, because it's just interesting. What caught my attention, though, about this, the title of this conversation was about 2 years ago, I got involved with a nonprofit, and actually, the way I got involved with them is my fiance and I were volunteering for an event that was about neurodiversity, and I had never even heard the terminology. To be quite,
I love that. To be candid, I have autism, so neurodiversity is a very big thing for me.
Okay, well, that actually, if you look up, there was the keynote speaker for the event was a Florida attorney, female Florida attorney, who has autism as well. So she was speaking, and I was just like very blown away. And then the young boys that were checking our coats, one of them was nonverbal. And so anyhow, got involved with the nonprofit later on down the road. And so when I came into this, I was like, I wonder if they're talking about neurodiversity, because I saw NeuroReality. I'm like, that's interesting. It's very, very interesting. So I'm definitely interested, because the nonprofit that we work with, we basically the founder, her son plays baseball, like travel baseball, and her younger son has autism. So before the games, they'll play 2 innings with special needs kids, and then they actually start the game. So yeah, super.
Connect with me on LinkedIn if you would. I would love to further our conversation.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. And I was wondering, because I jumped into the conversation towards the end. I might have to catch the replay of this and replay it. But when it comes to working with, are you guys specializing with kids with special needs or adults? Because my background like my grandmother was really involved with young adults that had special needs, because it feels like after these kids with special needs get older, the amount of help is kind of like isn't that great, from my experience. So
100%, you are totally on the ball with that. And that's sort of what I experienced with a lot of my patients initially, was that there weren't that many options. Like, imagine experiencing this devastating injury or having a debilitating issue and then not really being able to seek help. So indeed, we're definitely making this therapy available for individuals of all ages. You would be super surprised, of course. Well, actually, you wouldn't be super surprised. Kids pick it up like so quickly. Individuals with autism who are nonverbal, we haven't tried with that patient population yet, but it really is something that can be helpful, especially as you're talking about neurodiversity, for individuals that experience and perceive the world in their sense. We experience the world through our senses, and if you have a difference in the way that you perceive your world through your senses, using virtual reality can be a way to adjust and even escape from some of these things that are huge triggers for someone with autism, or someone whose brain doesn't adapt in the same way, like someone with a neurodevelopmental disorder such as ADHD. And I talked a little bit about brain-computer interfaces and how those are used with individuals with ADHD. So we have this neurodevelopmental neuroplasticity that's occurring, but we also have it when someone has a brain injury or they're going into a neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's. There's growth in our brain at all these different functions, and we would like to tailor to basically all age groups, because as you said, it's so lacking. There's so much care that is lacking for these young individuals that then go through the rest of their life not being able to be productive or autonomous, independent members of society. And that's what we all want, is to have our own independence. So that's a big goal of mine as well.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you. What I'm thinking is maybe what would be really neat is having an interview with you, and then I could also reach out to Christine Ross, who runs the nonprofit Aid Another that I work with, and kind of like get like a parent's perspective, and also the people that are working in the industry that you're in. I think you guys would have a really cool. I would like to facilitate that conversation if you're interested. I'll reach out to you on through email or on LinkedIn.
Remind me of your name.
LJ Haywood. So if you get
Haywood. All right, I'll remember.
I'll like to
connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm pretty much good to go. We're about to hit the road. So thanks, Garish, for letting me speak. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care. Thank you. Richard, I think you are next.
Hi, Faviola. Thank you. Thanks, LJ and Garish. Question. I'm willing to expose my children, 3 young ones, to VR or any really much technology because of the incessant trolling or vandalism or content moderation problems, the social issues that are riling it. How does NeuroReality development effort, how do they try to reduce that kind of abuse and use of that platform? Because if it's just another, potentially hackable or socially troubled avenue or medium, I have no interest in exposing my kids to it. That's all.
No, and that is a huge thing. So first of all, we're currently actually just beginning a study at the University of Chichester in the UK, where one special needs school and 5 other elementary schools are going to utilize Oculus Quest in order to see if it improves grades and behavior in children. But I can certainly understand your qualms because I share them. It depends upon which VR set you're using, which platform your children are on, which games they're playing. So that content is sort of, I think, more up to the parent to monitor. What we do to mitigate this is we're obviously extremely sensitive towards understanding that we have to be beyond GDPR compliant. We deal with medical data. So we focus on business to business sales and also telehealth sales, not by putting our app on an engine like Steam or like the Oculus Quest store. That might happen in the future when serious games are taken more seriously. But currently, the recommended use, I believe, for Oculus, I think that they've changed it to 14 and up, or it's 16 and up. They don't recommend children using it, and that's not necessarily because it's unsafe for your vision. Who's an individual who sits on our clinical board is actually an ophthalmologist, and so this is something that's important to us too. But there's a lot of data that gets collected that you may not know what third party that data is being sold to or being given to. And we have to really be very sensitive that we're handling data that needs to be double encrypted. It needs to be handled by medical ethical committees that tell you whether it's okay or not to even store that data for a particular amount of time. So I hope that sort of gives you a little bit more confidence in the way that these technologies are protecting the autonomy of individuals and making sure everything is anonymized.
It's easy to circumvent GDPR. The fingerprinting of individuals does not require any real... the law can't keep up with that kind of advanced technology. I think Google Analytics 4 is replacing Google Universal Analytics. There's no need for Facebook Beacon, etc. The law is simply unable to keep up with the pace of technologies. And of course, just 14 or 16 years old and up is not really useful. Any adult can be trolled by all the social media. So I think the problem is really vast and way beyond it will require total effort. And but thank you for those insights. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you. So it looks like it's only LJ and Richard on Clubhouse, and there's some few other people there. So thank you again, and I think we've answered all the questions so far, and I think everyone is kind of done with the questions even online. So thank you again, Faviola, for coming on the show and making this brighter for all of us to understand neuroscience and reality science and AR and VR and games, and obviously autism is one of them, which LJ also pointed out. So thank you again for being here and making this brighter for all of us here.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show. I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you again. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Absolutely.
Thank you. So we'll be ending on Clubhouse. So thank you again all for coming here, and thank you for supporting Back to Basics. Thank you again. God bless. Okay, and we will be also ending the live session also on YouTube and everything else. But before you guys leave, obviously there is a small video before I let you guys go. But thank you again all for supporting us. And we will be back next time on Back to Basics. There's a lot of crazy live shows happening, and I'm telling you, I'm so super excited. There is this one on the 19th that you'll be super excited. He is a rock band. He is a singer. He's based out of New Jersey, but he's an amazing person. You do want to know, what does it take for a band person or a musician to struggle from the entrepreneurship? And that's what this whole episode is all about. But thank you again all for supporting me. Take care. God bless.
Me. It was a wonderful conversation. Don't forget to subscribe and keep on listening. It's very juicy. Remember, everything in life is going back to basics.
Okay, and